excessive greed, exploitation. These type of things are some of the shadows of what I call classic capitalism. But let's not throw out the light. The poverty going from 90% to less than 8%, literacy going from 12% to 88%. We lead with excellence, we lead with dedication, and we lead with involvement. When we demonstrate respect, you always want to give a path for people to maintain their dignity, even when they're wrong. We didn't choose values that we aspired to be. We chose values that we were known for. We aspire to change the perception, and we can do that by aspiring to build more and more trust and to rebuild it when it gets broken. 200 years ago, more than 90% of the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, only 8%. Profit is the air that businesses breathe, but they also need to remember that it is not the end purpose of a company just to make profit.
Welcome to the Culture from the Heart podcast on the From the Heart Business Network. In a business world where employees and customers crave authenticity and trust, hosts Larry Levine and Darrell Amy are on a mission to find and showcase heart-centered executives and the companies they lead. You are about to hear an inspiring conversation with a visionary leader that's bringing heart into the workplace, empowering employees, serving their clients, and uplifting communities, all to create true success. This is Culture from the Heart. The movement starts here. Let's begin.
Welcome to Culture from the Heart. I'm your co-host, Darrell Amy, here today with Larry Levine, and we're joined by Curtis Hite. He is the CEO at Improving, a modern digital services company and trusted AI expert for Fortune 100, Fortune 500, and Global 1000 companies. Hey, Curtis, welcome. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Darrell.
It's our pleasure. We look forward to having you on, Curtis.
There's going to be fascinating discussion here today. And as we get kicked off, the question we ask every CEO on this show is, what does culture from the heart mean to you?
I think it begins with two things. I think it would be one that leads with authenticity, and the other one would be leading with care. And these 2 points are very important. I think leaders that genuinely care about other people, that can be sensed, and people see that and understand that. And then authenticity, the alignment of values and guiding principles that they not only see people talk about, but they see people live through. So.
No, this is good. And I appreciate, Curtis, that you brought up authenticity and care. And it's a common theme we hear at Culture from the Heart. So when you look at this through the lens at where you're at as the CEO, what's authenticity and care look like as you roll this out through Improving?
I'll start with authenticity. A lot of companies come up with values that they would consider to be aspirational values, values that they want to live into, and that is good, and we certainly have some of those. But often it might be more important or more appropriate to state values that you actually are. We call this our identity. And early in our company, we actually, about 3 or 4 years in, we did an exercise where all the employees kind of selected who they thought the top 7 improvers at the company were, those 7 employees that represented Improving. And this was very open-ended. It was like 3 or 4 rounds where we said, okay, these people were recognized as that. And we narrowed it down to 25. Then we narrowed it down from 25 to 15, 15 to 7. And those people got in a room and said, what was it about ourselves that these people nominated us? 8 values were selected in that category. Then we took those 8 values and we went out to our customers and our suppliers. And we said, of these 8 things, how do you experience us? And that's what we came up with. So we didn't choose values that we aspired to be. We chose values that we were known for and that our stakeholders actually saw in us. And that's one way to be authentic, is to actually choose values, who you actually are. We call this our identity. We lead with excellence, we lead with dedication, and we lead with involvement. Those are the three. We do have an aspirational value, that is building trust, but often that is broken, not consciously. And so you're always aspiring to that. And I think people even see that as a value, but we name that as our aspirational value.
I love that concept of identity, who we are right now. And by the way, I couldn't help it over here. You talked about your people as improvers. Unpack that for us a moment. That's awesome.
Well, a lot of companies do this. Our name, Improving, the motto or slogan is, it's what we do. So we constantly want our employees to be thinking about their personal development, both professional and out of the workplace development. And anybody that is part of this family, we consider to be an improver. The entire ecosystem, including our former employees.
You know, I love this word improving, which means that people are always learning. They're always striving to become better. Where'd this whole mentality start, Curtis? I'm just curious.
Well, it was very early on in the company. In fact, most of us started in another organization. The organization was called Blue Ocean Group when we first created the company back in 2006. But we had another company that we knew the founders of, and that name, it was Improving Enterprises at the time. And we talked about joining forces, and that's what we did. So we kind of merged them into Blue Ocean Group, but we like that name because it has such a positive outlook and perception. And so early on, we actually switched our name from Blue Ocean Group to Improving, which was the company we merged in. They were a training company, which is a phenomenal name for a training company as well. And here we are, 18 years later now with that name, and it's stuck. I think there's a lot of pride around it, even though it wasn't our original name, and it's something that others can actually look at. It's also a challenge, which, just like trust, it can be something that people kind of hold you to. Are you improving? Whether it's our employees or whether we are as a company, things like that. So it's both a great positive name, but it's also a challenge to everybody around us.
You mentioned your aspirational value of trust. And obviously, you know, when you look at surveys, I think we live in maybe the most skeptical season in our society and maybe in the history of the world that's ever happened out there. How do you nurture trust inside your organization? What does that look like in terms of what are you doing about the value of trust?
One, I would say we create a common language around trust. That language is rooted in Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust. So we talk about the 4 cores and the 13 trust behaviors, and that's where we start. We start with a common language. But at our company, it is actually a requirement for promotions to participate in Improving You that's around building trust. Improving You is Improving University. It's very important. Our welcome box, which is just rolling out, it comes with 2 books in it, one on conscious capitalism, one on Stephen Covey's trust book. And more than 1,100 employees today actually opt in. This is not a coercion. This is, we try to inspire and not require people. And 1,100 do these trust pods where each week they're talking in groups of 4 to 10, talking about these trust behaviors, how they pertain to our business, how they pertain to their personal lives, the counterfeits. And it really becomes pervasive because we are living these on a weekly basis, at least discussing them. And one of the most common feedback that I get from our employees is that this particular concept helps them at work, but even more so in their personal lives. Now, I will say that sometimes you get, right, when people say, hey, trust me, or we're company trust, it's aspirational because no matter what we do, sometimes we break that trust, often unintentionally or often from perspectives of hurt. You'll see these when people do reviews Sometimes people are let go or something like that for various reasons. Obviously, we care about them, but maybe it's not a beneficial. And then all of a sudden, you see how that might have broken trust. And what do you do in situations like that, right? We try to reach out, we try to care about these people, but this is true in any circumstance, a client, a supplier, where maybe something gets broken.
Oh. Well, it's time for a short break, but don't go away. There's so much more to explore when we return. Let's be honest, finding the right people and building the right culture, that's the holy grail for every leader.
That's why we recommend Titus Talent, because they don't just fill seats. They help you build teams that thrive.
With their partnership plans, you get more than just hiring help. You get a committed team by your side that helps you attract top performers and retain them.
They bring strategy, data, and a human touch to talent optimization. No guesswork, just results.
So if you're ready to invest in your people and create a culture where everyone wins, head over to culturefromtheheart.com/talent to learn more.
That's culturefromtheheart.com/talent. Your culture is your competitive advantage. Design it with Titus Talent.
And we're back having this great discussion with Curtis Hite, CEO at Improving. Curtis, right before the break, we were talking about trust, and the reality is in the middle of business, all kinds that trust does get broken from time to time. Talk to us some more about how you think about trust in your organization and in particular, regaining trust when it has been, damaged or broken.
So one of the 13 trust behaviors that Covey really talks about is practicing accountability. Righting your wrongs is a second one as well, because inevitably trust does get broken, most often unintentionally. It's the case. And one of the things that I coach our executives and employees on is how do we treat others, and what perspective do we go into a conversation about trust? And I have a tagline that says, we tend to judge ourselves by our intent, and we tend to judge others by our perceived behaviors of them. And there's two key words there, right? Perceived behaviors, how we perceive them. But it's a dangerous thing to do. We often don't assume good intent. And I ask our people, assume good intent, or at least don't assume bad intent when something happens. And if you can get both parties to do this and lean into some of the other behaviors, like listen first, right, and clarifying the expectations, things like this help you regain. And unfortunately, like a lot of things, when you lose trust, it's like one small act takes you back 4, 5, 6 steps. But the good news is you can regain that, and it's one small step at a time, and that's what we work on doing. When you put trust as your focus, though, the good news is when you really try to do this, you break trust less and less frequently.
When you think of trust inside of Improving, how would you define trust? What's trust look like to Curtis? I'm just curious.
Well, I like the way you phrase the question, Larry, because trust, I believe, is like a personality. Take these 13 behaviors, and I may value some of those behaviors way more than somebody else values certain behaviors. And the platinum rule really applies versus the golden rule. When interacting with people, if we treat others how we want to be treated, that is a good rule, that golden rule. But the challenge might be I value these behaviors and they value different ones. So we do the platinum. You have to discover which values are most important to them, and then you lean into those behaviors. Right? This is no different than a love language in a relationship. From a love language perspective, I'm a words of affirmation. My wife, she is acts of service. I could talk to her all the time. It's not going to land as much as it would with me. I need to love her with these acts of service. Same thing comes with trust. And which are the ones that are important to me? I believe talking straight, but when I say talking straight, it's talking straight in love. If your intent is to hurt, cause shame, or belittle, you're not talking straight. That's a counterfeit, even if it is true. That's the interesting thing. So talking straight's very important to me. Practicing accountability is extremely important to me, and demonstrating respect, because I believe in the dignity of human beings as part of my care. And when we demonstrate respect, you always want to give a path for people to maintain their dignity, even when they're wrong. So those are the three I would say that are very important to me. Somebody else might be things like, I want to be extended trust. People that like autonomy like to be extended that trust. Other people like to be heard, so they value being listened first or something like that. So that's the key here, is to understand this language of trust, understand the people and their priorities around you, and then treat them. I will notice that in the concept of conscious capitalism, we have a stakeholder model, not just a shareholder model, and stakeholder groups tend to value things very similarly, which is interesting. A client of ours, being a service, they are going to value, almost all of them, delivering results and practicing accountability, right? Those become really, really high, while suppliers might actually have a different set. They probably want us to listen first and extend that trust. So you got to know your stakeholder groups to interact with them most effectively.
Well, and that brings up the whole theme of conscious capitalism. And by the way, thank you for your leadership in that area and in that movement. For our listeners that might not be familiar with the conscious capitalism movement, would you be kind enough to take a moment to unpack that for us?
Sure. First of all, conscious capitalism is both a concept, it's an organization, and it's a movement. So it's all of these things in one. But as a concept and organization, it is a group of individuals and companies that believe overarching that business is one of the greatest forces of good in this world. And if you really look at it and really look at the stats, and you try to take the big picture and not look at some of the shadows that it also casts, capitalism has done great things in this world. 200 years ago, more than 90% of the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, only 8% or 7%. It doesn't mean we forget about those 8 or 7%. Absolutely not. But we have to acknowledge that capitalism is winning this war, and it's the basis of this war on, let's say, poverty or other things. And then the second thing is, businesses are the way that capitalism gets implemented. Small, big, large. And so this is a philosophy that we really subscribe to here. Business can be good. Our business does a lot of good. It does, yes, provide jobs. That's good in its own right. But we do much more than that. Conscious capitalism is built on 4 pillars, though. So businesses are a force of good is the arching theme. But the 4 pillars are a stakeholder model, not a shareholder model. Having a purpose that's beyond just making profit, and conscious culture and conscious leadership. Conscious leadership, some of the most common traits are what you talked about at the beginning. If you talk culture from the heart, it's authenticity and care. Be some of the most common traits of conscious leaders.
Hey, Darrell, you know what I like about this is the word conscious is put before all of this, which means, for me, you're bringing attention to this. It's top of mind. It's important. If I get that correctly, the word conscious.
Yeah, that is accurate. Conscious is key. The noun is capitalism, though. Remember, conscious is describing the type of capitalism. It's not describing something instead of capitalism. And this is a common misunderstanding. People might say, how can a conscious business ever do a layoff widely? Or something like that. Well, the conscious leader understands at some point that in order to survive, certain hard decisions need to be made. And these are very hard things to reconcile sometimes with individuals and people. But if I were to ask you to hold your breath as a person and I would shove you underwater, how long could you hold your breath, right? Profit is the air that businesses breathe. So they can only go so long with not getting air and a good amount of air. And people need to remember this. But they also need to remember that it is not the end purpose of a company just to make profit. We must have profit in order to live into our purpose. And these are how those two things come together. Generate the business, generate the profits, which enable us to use these businesses for good.
Awesome. Well, you're listening to Culture from the Heart. When we come back, more with Curtis Hite.
For many CEOs, sales feels like a black box.
You've got visibility into marketing metrics, financial dashboards, operational KPIs. But when it comes to the sales team, it feels like guesswork.
That black box, it's costing you, because if you can't see what's happening, you can't fix what's broken or fuel what's working.
That's where the Sales Index steps in. It opens the black box of sales and shows you the real story. Who's thriving, who's struggling, where they need help, and how much revenue is being left on the table.
You'll get clear, actionable data on sales behavior, mindset, and team culture, so you know exactly where to invest and how to drive growth.
So stop flying blind. Go to salesindex.ai and mention Culture from the Heart for 10% off an index of your sales team.
Sales Index, because when sales stops being a black box, you start unlocking real sales results.
Let's get right back at it. We're having a phenomenal conversation with Curtis Hite, CEO at Improving. Curtis, we were talking about conscious capitalism and talking about how profit is the oxygen, but it's not the purpose. When you think about purpose at your organization and organizations in general, how do you define the purpose of Improving?
Right. Well, purpose can be a complex concept, frankly. Right. It's not. One of the purposes is to generate profit, so you can actually live into your higher purpose, which is one of the things we talk about. But purpose can also be confused with what we do, and people could rightfully use that. Well, what's the purpose of Improving as a company? Well, we help other companies build software, integrate software systems. We're a services company. You could say that's our purpose. Yes, that is what we do. But when we use the term purpose, I think what we're talking about here is a higher purpose beyond what we do, and a higher purpose beyond just making money. And then the other thing I would say to that is a higher purpose cannot be or should not be confused with activities or interests or things like this. A company cannot be everything to everybody, right? There are different stakeholders in every model. There could be the environment in some companies. There could be the industry that they're in some organizations. Some organizations could have social purposes, right? A lot of organizations, but only the biggest ones, can start to attempt to be everything for everyone. But a lot of these things are initiatives. For Improving, it started with a story we call the six-hand story. It was actually at a Conscious Capitalism CEO Summit. I was hearing a keynote speak, and this was early in the company. And at the very beginning of the conference, the gentleman asked, for a show of hands, how many of you have had such a great experience with your IT team or your IT partner that you would share it with the people sitting around you? And I had the current president of Trader Joe's on one side of me and one of the operational presidents from Starbucks, and here's $9 million at the time Improving. And I was excited. My hand went up. But as I looked around the room with 200 CEOs, there was literally only 6 hands up, one of which was mine.
Wow.
And I went, wow, that's interesting in an intimate setting. And the keynote speaker said, it doesn't surprise me. only sales professionals have a worse perception amongst CEOs than IT professionals. And man, I sank in my chair because I'm a sales professional and a technology. At first, it doesn't matter which order to me. I was like, this is just not a good thing. Mm-hmm. And I got defensive in my notes. I don't even remember the keynote. I have the notes from it. And then I flipped the script in it. And I eventually said, what if what he's saying is true? And I assumed it was true, assumed good intent and assumed these things. And I was like, it is true. And this became, what was interesting is we have the ambition. We call our purpose, our ambition is to change the perception of our industry. And in order to do that, that changed our business in so much. We realized that at 9 million, we weren't going to do this at all. So we started looking for partners that wanted to join us. We did 5 acquisitions where almost no cash was exchanged because we were bringing partners on board as equal partners, and we were bringing them for this greater mission. Think about 5 acquisitions where in total, probably not even a full turn of EBITDA between them was used to acquire these businesses. We are accomplishing something bigger together. And even today, this thing continues to live on as we want to change some of these misperceptions in our industry. Why don't women want to be in our industry? Why do CEOs perceive? Why do so many minorities shun the IT industry when it's one of the top 5 paying jobs, and probably of the top 5 paying jobs requires the least amount of formal education? You can be highly productive in our field with the equivalent of trade degrees or trade certifications. So we try to live into this purpose, this higher purpose. Now, do we do things maybe we have a whole program called Come Together where we try to support different groups and different causes. The thought is nothing that's controversial, nothing that an activist would take part in, right? Does that mean we do nothing in the environment? Of course not. What I call our teams to do is, as a company, can't the 18 offices come together and think of something that they all can agree to do that benefits the environment? And the answer is yes. When they're divisive, often political topics, we just avoid those here. We are not an activist company. That is not living into our purpose. We are not an environmental company, even though we might do environmental things. So just understand that initiatives are not the same thing as purpose, higher purpose. Mm-hmm. And the last thing that I'll say, we have a whole bigger program, which is Improving Cares, something that we have recently named that. And it includes our generous advocate, which we give to employees selected causes at the end of the year in a big competition. It includes the local activities that we might do for our communities, which tend to be different by office. We let them select things like this. But we do care. We care about people. We care about our stakeholders, and we care about each other.
Hey, you know what I like about this, and I sincerely applaud you for this, Curtis, is I zeroed in on 2 words that you said, changing perception. And I think changing perception is what's driving the higher purpose at improving.
Yeah, absolutely. That is our ambition. We want to change the perception of both our professionals and our profession as a whole. And it's something we can do. We figured out actually a year later because the primary challenge is trust. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we talk about that as our aspirational value. We aspire to change the perception, and we can do that by aspiring to build more and more trust and to rebuild it when it gets broken.
Curtis, what an amazing story. I just want to say thank you, applauding and cheering you on and all that you're doing. This has really been inspirational and instructive. I know on behalf of all of our listeners, sincere thank you for who you are and what you're doing. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Darrell.
Amazing.
It's our pleasure. Oh,
what an inspiring conversation, Larry, and so many great takeaways from this here today. I know we're going to be talking about this one for some time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just have to bring this back to the surface again. Is I almost wanted to run through the screen and high five Curtis about changing perception, because we're deeply passionate about that here, is changing the perception of the sales world. I absolutely applaud Curtis for bringing the higher purpose and how they changed the perception.
Absolutely. And so much good stuff about building trust inside the organization and across multiple stakeholders. Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you to everybody who is sharing this show. We're on a mission to find the heart-centered leaders of companies and hear the stories of their cultures. And as I'm sure you can agree with me today, this is very, very powerful and inspirational. So if you know one of those leaders, we'd love to be introduced. We believe culture is the heartbeat of every organization. And as Curtis has reminded us, it's about building and recovering trust. So thank you for joining us today on this episode of Culture from the Heart. Until next time, lead with your heart and watch your culture thrive.
Thank you for joining us on this journey to discover heart-centered leaders shaping extraordinary company cultures. To access a leader guide with notes from this week's episode, simply click the link in the show notes or visit us at www.culturefromtheheart.com. Do you know a CEO who's built a culture from the heart? We'd love to hear their story. Head over to www.culturefromtheheart.com and click the Nominate Your CEO button. Until next time, remember, great cultures start with the heart.